Hello, welcome to Meeplecare. My name is Nicolas and today I would like to show you how to set up and play Lumicora. Lumicora is a game for 2 to 4 players, ages 10 and up, that plays in about 40 to 60 minutes. The game is published by Deep Print Games and White Goblin Games. Now before we go and take a look at those beautiful, gorgeous coral reefs, I would kindly ask you to hit the like and subscribe button. Oh, and you don't have to worry if it gets a little dark underneath the ocean surface. The sea shines in colorful hues as luminescent organisms bathe the coral reef in breathtaking light. This is not only a beautiful sight, but it's also a fascinating ecosystem and a home for many species. Sadly, the number of coral reefs has greatly decreased, and we must protect this habitat at all costs. In Lumicora, it is your job to rebuild one of these vital coral reefs. The player who can create the most impressive ecosystem by cleverly arranging their coral tiles, skillfully expanding different types of coral, and attracting as many marine animals as possible will become the winner of the game and a coral reef hero. In this how to play video, I will teach you how to play the game, and at the end of the video I will also show you how you can integrate all the different variants into your game. But of course, let's start by setting up the game. Place the scoreboard in the middle of the table. As you can see, the scoreboard has a light and a dark side. For your first game, you should use this dark side of the board. This turtle is your round tracker. Place it on the first space of the round track. As you can see, the game is played over a period of 10 rounds. These are the limestone markers. Place all these stones in this area. This is now the limestone supply. You will need these stones to help you construct your coral reef in deeper water. During the game, players will score points. To keep track of these points, you will use these fish markers. Each player can choose a fish in a color of their preference. Let's assume that for this two-player setup, the players have chosen the green and the pink fish. Place the chosen fish tokens on the 0 space of this score track. Place these 50 and 100 point tokens near the score track. When a player reaches or passes 50 points on the track, they will take a 50 point value token. If you pass 50 points again, you may flip your token to its 100 point side. Now each player takes a reef board that has a fish marker of their chosen color in the top right corner. Together, all players choose a side, A or B, and place their reef board in front of them with that side facing up. For your first game, it's advised to use the A side of the board. These are the Luminos tiles. There are 6 starting Luminos tiles that show you 2 different colors of coral. And then there are 104 Luminos tiles that come in 4 sets of each of the 4 colors of the game. Each set contains 26 tiles. We have green, purple, blue and yellow coral tiles. On the front of a tile you will see the color of the coral, a value, and some tiles show you one of the 4 species of animals. The values have the same distribution for each set. First up, take the 6 starting tiles, shuffle them and deal 1 to each player. Once all players have received a starting Luminos tile, you can return any leftover tiles back to the box. Now you place your starting Luminos tile, orient it in a direction of your choice, in the starting area on your reef board. On the A side of the reef board, the starting space is this green area in the middle of this bigger limestone area. So for example, you could place your starting Luminos tile like this in your starting area. Now you take those 104 Luminos tiles and you will turn them face down. When you take a closer look at the back of each tile, you will notice that some tiles have 3 fish, some tiles have 4 fish, and some tiles have no fish printed on their back. This will help you to use the correct amount of Luminos tiles for each player count. In a 2-player game, you will return all the tiles showing you 3 and 4 fish to the box, and then you would shuffle the 76 remaining tiles before placing them into the bag. In a 3-player game, you return all the tiles with 4 fish on their back, and you then shuffle the remaining 92 tiles face down. Next you will set a set of 6 tiles aside near the playing area. These will function as a hidden emergency stack. You will only use these in the rare case that you run out of Luminos tiles before the end of the game. You're now left with 86 tiles that you place into the bag. In a 4-player game, you guessed it right, you will shuffle all these 104 tiles face down, but you will now use 8 of these tiles to create your hidden emergency stack, before placing the 96 leftover tiles into the bag. Since we are setting up for a 2-player game, we can place these tiles back into the box, and then we place the 76 remaining Luminos tiles into our bag and give it a good shake. In the box you will also find these scoring tiles. Each player now takes a set of 4 scoring tiles. There is 1 for each color. On one side it shows you the coral, and on the back side it will show you a jellyfish in that coral's matching color. You can now place them with the coral side facing up on the matching spaces of your reef board. Now that you have a bag full of Luminos tiles, you draw 4 tiles and you place them in the center of the table in a general supply, with their coral side facing up. This supply is called the Atol. Next up, each player also draws 4 Luminos tiles from the bag and places those face up in the slots at the top of their reef board. This is now your personal supply. To finish setup, choose a starting player and give this player the octopus marker. Now I can finally show you how to play Lumicora. Lumicora is played over 10 rounds. Each round has an action phase and a scoring phase. During the action phase, each player will take a turn. During your turn, you will be able to take Luminos tiles and add them to your reef. The action phase is then followed by a scoring phase. And after the scoring phase of the 10th round, the game ends with a final scoring. Let's start by taking a detailed look at the action phase. Starting with the player with the octopus and then continuing in a clockwise direction, each player takes 1 turn. Your turn consists of the following 4 steps. During step 1, you first choose 1 lumino from your personal display and you place it face up with the other Luminos tiles in the Atol. During step 2, you can choose 1 of 3 actions. You either take a number of limestones, take 1 lumino from your personal display, or take up to 3 luminos of a single color from the Atol. Let's start by taking limestones. You now check the number on the lumino that you placed in the Atol during step 1. You may now take that many limestone markers from the limestone supply. In this case, I can now take 3 limestones. You place these on free storage spaces in the bottom left of your reef board. There are only 10 spaces where you can store a limestone. Any excess limestones that you gather are returned to the limestone supply. If you don't want to take limestones, you can choose the action that allows you to take 1 lumino from the 3 remaining luminos from your personal display and you take it into your hand. You will place luminos that are in your hand onto the reef board during step 4 of your turn. As a third option, you can take into your hand up to 3 luminos of 1 other color than the one that you added to the Atol in step 1. So since you previously added this green lumino tile, I could now choose either to take 1 of the purple tiles, 1 yellow tile, or I can take 1 or 2 blue tiles from the Atol and take them into my hand. Once you have performed one of the 3 possible actions, it's time to take step 3 of your turn. If there are now fewer than 4 luminos in the atoll, you draw new ones from the bag and you place them face up in the atoll until there are 4 luminos there again. Now we move on to step 4. If you took 1 or more luminos in your hand during step 2, you will now place them in any order into your reef. If you want to speed up the game, the person to your left may begin their turn while you do this. Before we take a look at how you can place these beautiful tiles in your reef, I first need to show you a special action that you can take at the start of your turn in the action phase. As you will see during the explanation of the scoring phase, when you perform a coral scoring, you will flip the scoring tile of that coral's matching color to the side that is showing you the jellyfish. As a special action, you can, at the start of your turn, return the jellyfish to the box, allowing you to swap any number of luminos in the atoll or in your personal display. You can swap these with random luminos from the bag. You would first return the chosen tiles to the bag, mix the bag thoroughly, and then you would draw the same number of luminos from the bag and place them back into the atoll or in your personal display, depending where you took them from. So you have to choose. You cannot do both. If you would have several scoring tiles showing you the jellyfish, you can do this several times in a row. With this special rule out of the way, it's finally time to place your luminous tiles on your reef board. When you look at your reef board, you can see that it has 42 base spaces. A space is either a limestone space or a water space. During setup, you placed a lumino in your starting area in the middle of this limestone area. This lumino consists of 2 coral spaces. In the case of the starting lumino, 2 coral spaces of a different color. All other lumino tiles that you will add consist of 2 coral spaces of a single color. When you add a lumino tile to your reef, you will either place it on base spaces or on top of coral spaces of other luminous tiles that you have already placed, creating different levels of coral. Luminos placed on base spaces are in level 1. Luminos placed on top of other luminos are in correspondingly higher levels. So if you now added this lumino tile on top of these 2 level 1 luminos, this lumino is now on level 2. Of course, you can't place luminous tiles anywhere you want. When you add a lumino to your reef, you will have to follow these next rules. When you place a lumino in your reef on base spaces, so creating a level 1, it must touch edge to edge at least 1 coral space of the same color that is also on a level 1. So I can place it here, on this spot, or here, or maybe I want to add it here. That's all possible. There are, however, 2 exceptions to this rule. If there are no visible coral spaces of the color that you are placing in level 1, you may place it adjacent to any lumino in level 1. The second exception happens when you can't place your lumino because you don't have 2 free spaces adjacent to the matching color. So here I only have 1 free space that would match with my blue coral, so I can't place the tile here. If this happens, and mind you, only when you are working on level 1, you then may again place it adjacent to any lumino in level 1. When placing a lumino on a higher level, so on top of other luminos, you must either place it on at least 1 coral space of the same color on a lower level, so I can place it on top of these 2 tiles, because I'm covering up a matching yellow coral, or your tile must touch at least 1 other coral space of the same color in the same level as the tile that you are placing. So here I can place this yellow coral tile on top of these different color spaces, because I am touching a tile of the same color on the same level. As you can see, you can cover numbers or species, but these will influence your scoring. As you have seen during my previous example, starting with level 2, it's very important to note that you are never allowed to completely overlap a lumino on a previous level. So I am not allowed to place this yellow lumino on top of this yellow lumino. Your lumino must always cover 2 coral spaces of 2 different luminos. And of course, it's also not allowed to place your lumino across spaces that are in different levels, causing the tile to tilt. During setup, I told you that you would need these limestones to create the reef in deep water. So whenever you cover a water space with a coral space, you will need to return that amount of limestones back to the supply. So if I would place my coral tile here, covering up 1 water space, I would return 1 limestone back to the supply. If during a later turn I would add this tile to my reef, covering up 2 water spaces, I would need to return 2 limestones back to the supply. Of course, if you don't have the necessary limestones, you can't place the lumino in that way. If you can't place a lumino or choose not to, you must put it back into the bag and you would lose 1 victory point, moving your fish marker 1 step backward. Once you have finished step 4, your turn ends. All luminos that you have placed in your reef will stay there for the rest of the game. At the end of the action phase, when each player has finished their turn, the scoring phase begins. Just like during the action phase, again, there are 4 steps that you need to follow. During the first step, all players will refill their personal display. You draw luminos from the bag and again you will place them in the matching spots on your reef board. Step 2 is an optional step, but a very important one. Starting with the person holding the octopus marker, each player, in clockwise turn order, chooses either to perform a coral scoring or pass. You can only perform 1 coral scoring per scoring phase. And each color of coral can only be scored once during each game. To perform a coral scoring, you select one of the 4 scoring tiles at the bottom edge of your reef that is still showing its coral side. You now flip that tile to its jellyfish side and immediately score the coral spaces of the matching color. You may only use each scoring marker once per game, so once it is flipped to its jellyfish side, you can no longer perform a coral scoring for that color again during the game. Now, how do you score? You will score 1 visible number in each level of your reef for that color. This number also has to be the smallest visible number of that color on that level. Let me show you how this works. My yellow reef contains of 3 levels. I have these 2 tiles on level 1. I have these 2 tiles, one is partially covered up, on level 2, and I have 1 tile on level 3. On each level, only your lowest number counts. So here, on level 1, I score 2 points. On level 2, I have 3, so that's 5 points. And I can add 4 points for the 4 that's on level 3. So now I can move my score marker to space 9 of the score track. So now I can no longer score the value of the yellow coral tiles, but during the final scoring, as you will see, I will still be able to gain points with these species and with the number of tiles that I have of that color in my reef. Whenever you have performed a coral scoring, you now look at the round track and you check the position of the turtle marker on the round track. As you can see underneath this round track, when you perform a coral scoring, you are allowed to take a number of limestones. If you score like we just did during round 1, 2, 3 or 4 of the game, you can take 4 limestones from the supply. When you score during round 5, 6 or 7, you can take 2 limestones. Scoring during the 8th and the 9th round gives you 1 limestone. Scoring during round 10 doesn't give you the bonus of taking any limestones. Of course, if you don't have any room in your limestone supply, you can't take extra limestones. Maybe it's worth noting that you can perform a coral scoring even if you wouldn't gain any points, because maybe you just want to collect the limestone bonus. We now arrived at step 3 of the scoring phase. If at least one player performed a coral scoring, you would now pass the octopus marker to the last player to carry out a coral scoring in this scoring phase. That player would now receive the octopus marker and is now the first player. If no scoring was performed, the octopus marker stays with the current player. To finish the scoring phase with step 4, you now move the turtle marker to the next space of the round track. When the marker reaches space 10, the 10th round will be played, and after the scoring phase of that 10th round, you will perform one final scoring. Let's take a look at how that final scoring works. Final scoring is done in a number of categories, but you can find each of those categories on the scoring board. First, you get 2 points for each scoring tile on your reef board that has its jellyfish side face up. So here I would gain 4 points. You then score 1 point for each 2 remaining limestones that you have on your reef board, scoring 1 point for these 2 limestones that I have left at the end of the game. Next up, you score visible animals in your reef. As you can see on the scoreboard has all 4 species of animals. You have mollusks, crabs, seahorses and starfish. You now score points according to the number of visible animals of each of these 4 species. Let's take a look how well I did with each of those 4 species. I have 1, 2, 3 mollusks visible in my reef. This would score me 4 points. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 crabs in my reef. Those 4 crabs score me 10 points. I only have 1 seahorse, and 1 seahorse scores me 1 point. The only starfish that I have in my reef will score me 4 points. As you can see, the more animals of a species that you gather, the more points you score. However, from the moment that you have 4 animals of one species, there's no point in collecting more, because this is the maximum points that you can achieve for that species. The last thing you score are color majorities. Again, on the scoreboard, you can see how this is done. For each color, you count the number of spaces of that color that are visible in your reef. They don't have to be in the same level and they don't have to touch each other. You then compare that amount of spaces to the other players. If you have the most visible spaces of that color, you now score 4 points. If you have the second most, you score 2 points. There are no points awarded for third or fourth space. In case of a tie for the most visible spaces, all tied players receive 3 points, and no victory points are awarded for the second most spaces. In case of a tie for the second most spaces, all tied players receive 1 point. Of course, you are only entitled to score for a color if you have at least 1 space of that color visible in your reef. As an example, I can count my yellow spaces. Here in my reef I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 visible yellow spaces. And you would now compare your total spaces with the other players. At the end of the game, the player with the most victory points wins the game. In case of a tie, the tied player with the most limestone markers in their storage wins. If still tied, the victory is shared. Now that you know how to play Lumicora, I will gladly show you all the variants that you can integrate into your game. During setup, we use the dark side of the scoring board. Let's flip this board to its light side and see how this changes your final scoring. As you can see, you score jellyfish, limestones and color majority in the same way as you do on the dark side of the board. However, instead of just scoring according to the number of visible animals, each animal is now scored individually. You will earn points depending on the level or type of the adjacent spaces. Each species still scores a different amount of points. A space is considered adjacent when they are next to each other when viewed from above. Each species has a minor scoring ability on the left and a major scoring ability on the right. For a minor scoring, you only need at least one adjacent space of the matching type or level. For the major scoring ability that you can see on the right, several spaces need to match the level or type. Now I need to tell you a very important rule before we take a look at a few examples. When scoring these animals, each animal can only receive victory points for one of the two scorings. A mollusk scores you 1 point in a minor scoring when it's adjacent to at least one water space. The major scoring happens when a mollusk is adjacent to at least 3 water spaces. This mollusk scores me 1 point. It's adjacent to at least 1 but not 3 water spaces. The same goes for this one, again adjacent to 2 water spaces, but this one is adjacent to at least 3 water spaces. So these two have a minor scoring and this one has a major scoring that scores me 2 points. A crab has a minor scoring when it's adjacent to at least a coral space on the same level, and it has a major scoring when it's adjacent to at least 4 coral spaces on the same level. So here, this crab has 3 spaces on the same level, so it would have a minor scoring. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4 coral spaces that are adjacent on the same level. He would score me 3 points. The same goes for this one. He is surrounded by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 coral spaces of the same level. Lastly, I have this one, and he only has 1 space on the same level. So he would also have a minor scoring of 1 point. Seahorses want to have a lot of protection, so they like to be in a spot that is surrounded by higher coral. That's why each seahorse has a minor scoring when it's at least adjacent to 1 higher coral space, and it has a major scoring of 7 points when it's completely surrounded by higher coral spaces. These higher coral spaces can be on different levels of height, but they have to be higher than the seahorse itself. It's a bit hard to see in this top-down view, but this seahorse only is adjacent to 1 higher coral space, so he would score me 2 points. But this seahorse is completely surrounded by higher coral spaces. We have these 4 spaces that are on level 2 and these 2 spaces that are on level 3. The seahorse itself is on a level 1, so he is completely surrounded by higher coral spaces, so he would score me 7 points. Contrary to the seahorses, starfish prefer to be as close to the surface as possible. A minor scoring would happen when a starfish is adjacent to at least 1 coral space that's on a lower level, and a major scoring happens when it is surrounded by 5 coral spaces on lower levels than the starfish itself. Looking at our example here, this starfish, again a bit hard to see on this top-down view, is on a level 3. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces that are on a lower level, so this starfish would score me 4 points. This starfish is completely surrounded by coral spaces on a higher level, so this starfish scores no points. Then lastly I have this one. He only has 1 space that is lower than himself, so this starfish scores me 2 points. As a second variant, you can choose to play on the B side of your reef board. Remember that during setup, all players must place their board on the same side to start the game. When you turn your board to the B side, you will see that there are fewer limestone spaces adjacent to the starting area where you will place your starting lumino. During the game, you will place your luminos and you will try to cover up these spaces. Because at the end of the game, during the final scoring, if there are still these negative scores visible, you will have to subtract them from your final scoring. As usual, the player with the most victory points after that final scoring wins, and in case of a tie, again, the player with the most limestones left in their storage wins. If there is still a tie, the victory is shared. You now also know how to add these two variants to your game. Now, before I can let you create your own beautiful reef, there is one thing that I haven't shown you, and that's the use of the emergency stack. During setup for a 3 or 4 player game, we have created this stack of emergency tiles. In the rare case that you need to draw a lumino from the bag and it's empty, you take all the luminos from the emergency stack and you place them into the bag. Give it a good shuffle and now you can continue drawing. If this happens in the 10th round, you just continue the game as usual. If it happens before the 10th round, you continue the game until the end of the scoring phase of that round. But then you immediately conduct another scoring phase, and after that the game would end prematurely and all players perform the final scoring. This is all you need to know to set up and play Lumicora. If you like this video, please click the like and subscribe button, and you can always follow Meeplecare on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. This was Meeplecare, taking care of your meeple needs.